I hope you're well. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is a book tag. It has been a minute and I'm feeling a little bit out of practice, but I figured this was the week to do a book tag, and a book olive had graciously tagged me in, I believe, early to mid-January to do this. So I'm a little overdue. I hope you'll forgive me, Olive. Normally this week would be the week that I post my wrap up from the reading from the month prior, but to be honest, I only finished reading one book in February, so I'm just gonna roll it into my March wrap up, and I hope you guys don't mind that. But today's video is all about the By the book tag. Now, this is a compilation of questions that the New York Times asks authors. It's one of my favorite columns to read every week. I believe they come out on Thursdays, and it's just such a fascinating idea to ask these well-established, well-known authors about their reading lives and to better understand them in that way. So this is my attempt at answering some of those same questions, and we're gonna just dive right into it and hopefully not make a complete fool of myself. But before I go any further, please, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please do so, because it means the world to me and we're so close to 1,000. So your subscription would help me get to that number. In any case, shameless plug over, let's dive right in. So the first question is, what book is on your nightstand now? It is very quaint of them to think that I only have one book on my nightstand, because I have 6. So I'm gonna go through them quickly. I don't think I would ever just have one book on my nightstand though. It is kind of my most desired TBR at that moment. So one of the books is Voices in the Evening by Natalia Ginsburg. I always want to say Natalie, it's Natalia. And this, embarrassingly, was a book that I started for Wit Month in August. I think I got like 30 pages into it. It's translated from Italian, and it's set kind of after World War II in this small town in Italy, and just dealing with sort of the lives of those people and how they've been affected post-World War II. I was enjoying it. It was a little weird, but this was also at the height of my reading slump, so I didn't finish it. It's a book that I've kept next to my nightstand because I would really like to revisit it, probably start from page 1 and read through it completely, but this is book 1 on my nightstand. The next book is Hag, Forgotten Folktales Retold. It does what it says on the label. It is a collection of folktales from Britain and Ireland, is what the book says, revisited, reimagined by women authors from Britain and Ireland in the 21st century. It's a collection that I bought with kind of spooky vibes in mind a couple years ago, and I always mean to get to it and just read one of the stories every night and get into the mood, and I just haven't. So I keep this beside my bed in the hopes that one day I will. Ooh. Next is The Creative Tarot by Jessa Crispin. For anyone who is an OG subscriber, you know that I do tarot. I don't consider myself very good at it because I still need this handy dandy book with me to interpret the cards, but this is more of a reference guide for me. So I always keep it nearby, where I also keep my tarot cards. I do keep my most used tarot deck in my nightstand. So this is just to keep it close at hand. One of my current reads is Ecstasy by Mary Sherratt, which is one of my Historiathon reads. If you don't know, Historiathon is my Women's History Month themed readathon that I co-host with Charlotte from over at Connie Reads. And this is a novel on Alma Mahler, who is this little-known Austrian composer that, until her Historiathon, I didn't know was in fact a real person. So I'm about 30 to 40 pages into this right now, really enjoying it, enjoying the cameos of some historical figures, including Gustav Klimt, who is one of my favorite artists of all time. But yeah, so this is actually a book I am currently reading. Then another book for her storyathon that I have on my nightstand is Half Breed by Maria Campbell. It is a memoir of an Indigenous woman. I believe it covers her childhood and young adulthood. It seems like it's going to be a very gritty, raw, and hard book at times on a sort of emotional level, because I do believe that it deals with abuse and poverty. And so it's a book that I really want to read because I don't read enough Indigenous authors, to be quite honest. And it's also been on my TBR for quite some time. And then lastly is Buyer Personas by Adele Ravella. This is not my normal reading fare, but I am reading it for work in my new position, really digging into what buyer personas are and how to utilize them for the purposes of marketing in my job. So this is something that I'm slowly working my way through. It's not a thick book, but it is business writing, so it's not something that you can sit down and binge. At least I can't. Okay, moving on to question 2. What kind of reader were you as a child? Which childhood books and authors stick with you the most? I was a voracious reader as a child, which I don't think surprises anyone on BookTube. I wanted to get my hands on everything and anything. I was the type of kid that would curl up in her room and read a book from morning until evening. I could easily get through some big books in a 24-hour span because I barely slept, barely ate, and mom would have to come in and make sure I at least had a glass of water or something, because I was just kind of that obsessive with books that I really, really enjoyed. Some books and authors that stick with me are it's kind of wild, because some of them are definitely not YA or children level books at all. So if I had to talk about more sort of middle grade YA, the Royal Diaries series, those were my jam. I would borrow those from the library all the time. The one on Anastasia, Mary Queen of Scots, Eleanor of Aquitaine, I devoured them. But other books as a child that I read, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I read that a few times, and that is a 1,000+ page book. It is admittedly problematic, but at that point in my life, I didn't know or wasn't fully aware of that. It's actually a book that I talk about wanting to revisit, because now with sort of a better understanding of society and everything we've experienced as a society as a whole in the last few years, I think it would be a very different reading experience. But that was one of those books that I would sit and read from cover to cover, despite the fact that it was really, really, really large. So those are just some books that really stick in my mind from my childhood. 3. How have your reading tastes changed over time? I honestly don't know if they've changed all that much. I want to say that even from childhood, I was very into historical fiction. I was very into history, so I was reading a lot of biographies, but I still really read a lot of the same things. If anything, I think I'm a little bit more discerning now as a reader. I think at the time, basically every book that I read, I really enjoyed, or I thought I really enjoyed. So if anything, I do think I'm just a little bit more discerning. I know that I like character-driven books now, and I think a lot of what was available to me as a child and a younger reader were more plot-driven books, which are fun, but I know in my heart of hearts that the character-driven stories are the ones that make my heart aflutter and make me want to be a reader. So if anything, that's probably what's changed. Not so much the types of books, but how I approach my level of enjoyment and what I look for now when I'm going to pick up a book in my core genres, basically. So question 4 is, are there any classic novels that you recently read for the first time? And honestly, I'm about to scroll through the story graph and see what a recent classic novel is that I read for the first time. Okay, so like classic, Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. That was the first time I read it, and it looks like I read it around last year this time, actually. I gave it a 3.75 stars, so it obviously wasn't a favorite of mine, but I've read the Bronte sisters and really enjoyed Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Jane Eyre was a favorite book of mine for years and years and years, and it's probably one of the books I've reread the most, although I actually haven't read it recently. But as far as classics that most people consider, that's one of them. But I do tend to skew a little bit more towards those books written in the 20th century now than I did a couple of years ago. I think just because I'm always looking to expand my reading canon and get a better understanding of books in that time period, because I do feel like in school you read books from the 20th century, but it's the same ones over and over again. So that's my answer to that question. Moving right along to the next one, which is, has a book ever brought you closer to another person or come between you? I don't think a book has ever come between me and a person, but I definitely say that books have brought me closer to people. I mean, case in point, this BookTube channel, I have made some wonderful friends on BookTube because of our shared passion of reading and because of commonalities in books that we read, and that has been a real joy. The same thing with my subscribers and those of you who regularly comment in the comment section, I guess. I feel like I know you and have a friendship and relationship with you because almost every video you guys pop up and make comments and talk about the books you're reading, what you liked, what you didn't like, and that's important to me. That has always been great. The same thing has happened with my courses at college, and just in general, books also helped me to find some of my closest friends because we all worked at a literary agency at the same time. So books have been a really integral part of my friendship building over the years, for sure. I don't think there's just one specific book that has done that. I think overall it's just a shared passion for books and reading and that experience overall that has helped me to make some really, really amazing friends. Question 6. Which subjects do you wish more authors would write about? Ooh, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot in history that I would like to see authors write about. I, in general, would love to see more books on lesser known historical figures. I mean, I love Queen Elizabeth I, but there are a million books on her. Same thing with Mary Queen of Scots. The fact that there's a novel on Alma Mahler excites me because she's someone I didn't know existed prior to picking up the book. And I would just like to see more of those lesser known women, and definitely lesser known BIPOC women, LGBTQ plus women. I feel as though there's just not enough there yet. I think it is getting a little bit better, but I would love to see that. For me, that's really what it is. Give me the fiction, the nonfiction on these women throughout history. Explore time periods, episodes in history that are less common knowledge and teach me things. Like, I think that's the easiest way for me to answer that question. I know that's not necessarily giving you specific topics, but for for me, I do think that would be wonderful. I would be all over those books. Question 7. Can a great book be badly written? What other criteria can overcome bad prose? The answer is yes, I do think great books can be badly written. I'm not gonna name any of those books because I really don't want to lose subscribers, but I do think great books can be badly written, and I think how you overcome that bad prose is the characters and the plot. For me, if you have really beautifully written characters who I can feel some affinity to, or that I can have an emotional reaction to their story, that can make up for somewhat wobbly prose. I think for me, a good book a lot of the times has to do with that emotional connection and how it makes me feel, whether it's meant to make me feel light and airy and uplifted, or if it's gonna make me sob, or if it's gonna make me angry and want to take action. It's those emotional connections and emotional responses that make a great book to me. To be honest, there are some books that I've read that I've given 5 stars that probably the prose isn't the most earth-shattering prose on the face of the planet, but because of that connection that I had with the characters, especially because, as I said, I am a character-driven book reader, that can make up for it significantly. 8. You're organizing a literary dinner party. Which 3 writers, dead or alive, do you invite? Oh my word. I have to say, this is one of my favorite questions in this by the book column. But now that I'm asking it of myself, oh my goodness. I think author 1 would be Tennessee Williams, the playwright. And that is because I spent so much of my collegiate career reading his books, analyzing his books, and then coming up with my senior thesis on his books. And I wrote basically a paper, a 60-70 page paper on why I think Tennessee Williams is a female Gothic writer. And I would love to just pick his brain about some of the things that I talked about there. I would love to just sit there and spew my thesis at him and get him to tell me yes, no, or maybe. And I would just love to hear more about what inspired him to write those stories. I don't know if it's not on screen now, but I literally have this volume of his diaries that I occasionally thumb through, and just getting to know him better would make me very, very happy. Author 2, I would say Daphne du Maurier, actually. I read a biography of hers last year. The biography was okay. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it made me very interested sort of in the mystique around Daphne du Maurier. And her books are wonderful. I'd love to hear her talk about Rebecca or My Cousin Rachel, or even Jamaica Inn. Those are the 3 that I've read so far. I just feel a kinship to those books, and she just seemed like a really fascinating individual from the biography. So I would like to get to know her a little bit better. And 3rd, I'm gonna maybe go with Pat Barker, just because the Regeneration trilogy and her Greek retellings, I would love to speak with her and see what she's planning to write next, to be quite honest. See what it is about war that really seems to capture her imagination, because all of those books of hers that I have are very sort of entrenched in war, and she's still alive to my knowledge, so I would love to know what she's working on. So maybe that would be my third, with Anne Petrie a close third. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna go with those. I feel okay about those. What moves you most in a work of literature? Oh my word. I feel like I answered that question already in my great books, bad writing answer. I think it's a connection to the character's lived experience. And when I say lived experience, it's not necessarily that the character actually was a real person, but I think understanding their motivations and seeing them develop and make choices and seeing the repercussions of those choices, I am just really driven to characters, which I think is why certain books like thrillers and action and a lot of fantasy don't necessarily do it for me, because it's very plot driven. Characters are what move me. Their experiences are what move me. That is why I can sob through a book and come out on the other end and be like, oh my god, it's the best book I have ever read. So that is definitely a factor. You know, I do get very excited about pretty writing, not pretentious writing. I think there's a difference. Pretty writing that when you see it on a page, you just know it's good because it sends shivers down your spine. You literally put the book down for a moment to marinate in it. It just makes you feel so good. It sends shivers, actual shivers. So when you come across those books that make you remember why you read books, why you're such an avid reader, it's great. But I would say the characters are what move me. Their experience is what moves me. And the last question is, what do you plan to read next? Honestly, so many books. Right now I am focusing on my Herstory-a-thon books, so I will put the TBR in the cards, but the book that I'm trying to finish in addition to Ecstasy is The Victorian and the Romantic by Nell Stevens, which is a memoir, which I'm also reading for the Herstory-a-thon. It wasn't a book on my TBR, but it was available as an audiobook, and I needed an audiobook. So that's one that's in progress right now. I think the next book that I will attempt to read is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which again is another Herstory-a-thon read. It's a book that I had started in January, then we started planning Herstory-a-thon 2.0. This is our second year. And so I was like, hold on, I'll wait, because I'd only gotten maybe 15, 20, at most 30 pages into it. So that's the next book that I think I'm gonna pick up. And yeah, I think that is it, which is wild. Some of those questions are really hard, and I feel like I rambled quite a bit. So hopefully I was somewhat coherent, but I know I can tag people. I don't know who to tag because I don't know who's done this yet, so I will just say, if you are interested in this, go for it. Consider yourself tagged. Any of my subscribers, feel free to answer the questions, or one or two of the questions in the comment if you so choose. I would love to hear your answers. And once again, thank you, Olive, for tagging me. This has been a ton of fun. In any case, thank you so much for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe, because it'll mean the world to me and help this little channel grow. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.